This is Better Than News, and I'm Joe Darginio with your weekly White House report for the week of February 18th through the 24th, 2023. What are they up to now? Well, besides more taxes, more federal disaster funding, more money to Ukraine. Oh, and National Eating Disorders Week. I also found a lot of very interesting things while looking into arms trade reporting. Here on February 20th of 2023, we have another one of these memorandum on delegation of authority under sections of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. And I can probably tell you what this says. By the authority vested in me as President, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including 621 of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, I hereby delegate to the Secretary of State. Here we go, Anthony Blinken. We've talked about him and his prior dealings as a military advisor, or shall we say a consultant to military industrial firms. So he's going to give another $450 million in defense articles in assistance to Ukraine, and $10 million in commodities and services from the inventory and resources of any agency of the United States government to provide assistance to Ukraine. Well, we've seen several of these in recent reports. I've personally gone over a few of them, and I expect there will be many more unless something changes. And so also here on February 20th, we have another disaster declaration, and typically I'm going to be pretty harsh about the whole politicians spending money idea. This I'm going to go a little easier on because we're talking about helping the Rosebud Sioux tribe, which I do believe we should help where we can. Suffice to say, I am an advocate for the protection of the Native American tribes. But the bottom line here is federal funding is available, and I wish we had a way to do that without going through the federal government. Now also here on February 20th, President Biden approves the Oglala Sioux Tribe Declaration, and it's funny that this is worded a little differently from similar ones. It's not a declaration of the tribe, it's apparently a declaration of a major disaster. Why it's not worded like the others is at least a little curious, but federal funding is available. And again, helping the Native American tribes, helping anybody, whether they're a Native American tribe or your next door neighbor, help anybody you can. I just wish we could do it without the government. On February 23rd, 2023, President Biden issued the Memorandum on United States Conventional Arms Transfer Policy. Now, there are some very interesting things that show up in this. Apparently, this is a regular announcement by presidents. We're going to look at one from President Trump and do a little compare and contrast. But in here is what appears to me to be an outright lie. They talk about when we're transferring arms amongst allies, we want to take certain things into consideration: our national security, weapons of mass destruction, human rights, potential violations using some of these arms, and overall try to establish some, as it says, norms and controls, supporting it with the idea that the United States foreign policy and national security objectives are best advanced by facilitating arms transfers to trusted actors who will use them responsibly and who share United States interests. So overall, the objectives include enhancing interoperability with our allies, contributing to global security, promote international peace and stability. So as we go through here, we find references to lots of other documents, and when I looked up the Arms Export Control Act 1976, I find a lot of very, very interesting things in this, and I'm sure this will be a frequent subject and possibly the subject of a special report. And one of the things that I'm definitely going to take a good look at with you here is the presidential waiver. The word waiver appears 73 times on this page, and rather than break them all down, basically in many cases they're simply saying the president or one of the other members of his cabinet in many cases are allowed to disregard the existing law for whatever reason they may see fit without any real constraint on when a waiver is to be issued. And this is politicians just saying, well, if we don't think that's good now, we're going to not do it. That's just politicians using the law selectively at their own discretion. Another surprising element in such a document is this: restraint in arms sales to sub-Saharan Africa. It is the sense of the Congress that the problems of sub-Saharan Africa are primarily those of economic development, and that the United States policy should assist in limiting the development of costly military conflict in that region. Therefore, the President shall exercise restraint in selling defense articles and defense services, and in providing financing for sales of defense articles and defense services to countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan, of course, means south of the Saharan Desert, the large, lush, and natural resource-rich region of the planet, really. This ties in very closely with something that I'm working on a new video for, and that is on National Security Memorandum 200. And it's going to surprise you what's in there if you don't already know. But this is that policy written into Chapter 39 of U.S. Code. And I think that's something that we as a nation who would like to be cooperative with other nations, that's wait till you see the National Security Memorandum 200 video. You're not going to like your country for a minute. The other thing that really surprised me in this document, and this apparently dates from December 12th, 1991, no funds appropriated or otherwise made available by this or any other act may be used in any fiscal year to conduct, support, or administer any sale of defense articles or defense services to Saudi Arabia or Kuwait until that country has paid in full, either in cash or in mutually agreed in-kind contributions, the following commitments made to the United States to support Operation Desert Shield/Desert Storm. And in the case of Saudi Arabia, that looks like $16,839,000,000. And in the case of Kuwait, $16,006,000,000. I don't remember hearing anything about that on the news during the period around 1991. Now, I was on the younger side. I was 17, 18 in that time period, so I might not have caught all the news. But I don't remember hearing about $16 billion coming from those two countries. So that's the kind of thing you find when you dig deep. This executive order also refers to the Export Control Reform Act of 2018, which I did go over at a glance, and it's more when we share arms, be mindful of weapons of mass destruction and humanitarian laws and various other seemingly sensible policies. Then it also refers to the Foreign Assistance Act, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and the annual National Defense Authorization Acts. We've talked about the Foreign Assistance Act and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act in previous videos. The National Defense Authorization Acts, that's a big topic, and particularly the one released in 2012 has quite a bit of issues with it that I look forward to talking about, but not in this video. We'll get back to that. So, going along, one of the things that I find in here is the United States will continue participation in and support for multilateral, regional, and sub-regional arrangements that contribute to the objectives and interests outlined in this policy, such as the United Nations Register of Conventional Arms, the United Nations Standardized Instrument for Reporting Military Expenditures, the United Nations Principles for Transactions linked to foreign government end users for products or services with surveillance capabilities, the Missile Technology Control Regime, the Wassenaar Arrangement, the Inter-American Convention on Transparency in Conventional Weapons Acquisitions, and any other relevant or successor arrangements. So let's take a look at these. The United Nations Register of Conventional Arms. So when we look at the United Nations Register of Conventional Arms and pull up the United States, we're going to look at the exports in particular. And here in 2021, let's just grab the first thing. Looks like armored vehicles, armored combat vehicles in the year 2021 to Lithuania. Lithuania reported we sent them 50, but the United States hasn't submitted a report. Slovenia reported we sent them 38. The United States hasn't submitted a report. Also for the year 2021, here Australia reported we sent them 75 battle tanks, but we haven't submitted a report. And this goes on and on. Turkey said we sent them 8,000 large caliber artillery systems, and we haven't submitted a report. And we can look at the imports by year, and here 2021. Czech Republic says that they sent us 2 armored combat vehicles, and we haven't submitted a report. And we see over and over again, combat aircraft and unmanned combat aerial vehicles. Australia reported they sent us 1, we didn't report. France reported they sent us 17, we didn't report. But apparently we're continuing support for and participation in programs like this. So that'll be interesting. And then the United Nations Standardized Instrument for Reporting Military Expenditures. And a look at the most recent report in 2021 for 2020, and apparently the United States has not submitted any data in any of the various options, including the online submission form. So we did not apparently participate in that program that was specifically mentioned. And again, here we are in the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs. And we look at the database. For the United States. And here's the information they have available for that. Looks like reporting expenses from 2002 all the way up to 2015, but no information on 2016, 2017, 2018, to include 2021 and 2022. So the notion that we are continuing participation and support in such programs does not appear to be true. Okay, the next one, United Nations Principles for Transactions Linked to Foreign Government End Users for Products or Services with Surveillance Capabilities. Now, what did come up is a Department of State statement. And it looks like a 22-page booklet. And in sifting through all of this, it probably deserves at least a little more scrutiny, because there's probably something squirrely in there, but that's going to be put on the back burner. Missile Technology Control Regime. And this is largely for nuclear weapons, it looks like. The Inter-American Convention on Transparency in Conventional Weapons Acquisitions. And the interesting part about this is, apparently we've signed it back in 1999, but we have not ratified it. So, are we participating? So, in addition to some things that probably deserve a little more scrutiny, and especially some more follow-through in the claim of participating in and support for. I think that there's too much potential for conflict of interest, especially with a former military consultant as our Secretary of State. I think these are things that we really need to be mindful of, and especially in terms of when waivers are issued, which basically allow these bureaucrats to ignore existing law. And when they write the law so that it sounds good and it sounds noble and it sounds like it's promoting peace, well, then they issue a waiver and they're not necessarily promoting peace in some cases. Now, the last thing that I want to address with this particular executive order is one word. So I've queued these up side by side. On the left here is the February 23rd, 2023 Memorandum on United States Conventional Arms Transfer Policy. And we're going to look down here at the bottom. One of the last few things it says on earlier presidential actions, Section 8. This memorandum supersedes National Security Presidential Memorandum 10 of April 19th, 2018. And so we have April 19th, 2018, National Security Presidential Memorandum. And so this supersedes the previous one in 2018. And so I look for the word border in today's executive order, and the word border does not appear a single time, And yet, if we go over here to the security memorandum issued by Donald Trump, it does appear these security objectives include countering terrorism, countering narcotics, promoting regional stability, and improving maritime and border security. So that document that did make border security one of the objectives is now superseded by an order that does not. February 24th, 2023, which was a Friday, President Biden proclaimed increasing duties on certain items from the Russian Federation. And he refers to ending importation of Russian oil act back on April 8th of 2022. He talks about Executive Order 14066 of 2022 and Executive Order 14068 also of 2022 and in Proclamation 10420 of June 27th, 22, which were all efforts to increase the costs of goods coming from Russia. Now, unfortunately, that's a double-edged sword because you may cut Russia, but you're going to cut some American consumers too. And then also, on that same Friday, a proclamation on adjusting imports of aluminum into the United States. And this reveals some interesting things. This executive order does clearly identify Russia as a major source of our aluminum imports and is particularly harsh on it. It does impose additional tariffs, taxes, for anybody that's not on a very short list. And that list is Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, Mexico, and South Korea. They're the only ones apparently that don't get additional taxes for imports of derivative steel articles or derivative aluminum articles. So there's some other minutiae in here. Bottom line is aluminum prices are going up, guys. Oh, and so are steel. But on the other side is that it is partly done to encourage domestic production, which means domestic revenue, and we want domestic revenue. We want our aluminum and steel industries to be strong and producing as much as they can, and unfortunately we like to pay our workers a little more than some of the other countries, so we have to pay a little more out of pocket when we go to buy these sorts of things. Oh, look over here, guys. A proclamation on National Eating Disorders Awareness Week 2023. Also that Friday, February the 24th. Don't be distracted by that. And lastly, Friday, February the 24th, a memorandum on unexpected urgent refugee and migration needs. Let's see what this says. This is essentially a bit of a disaster declaration, like we might see here in the States, except for it applies overseas. The United States Emergency Refugee and Migration Assistance Fund, they're getting $50 million for Turkey and Syria for those earthquakes just a few days ago. And once again, I definitely hope we can help everybody, but to have politicians do it is usually going to create opportunities for a conflict of interest, in other words, corruption. So we look, and this is basically through payment administrative expenses of the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration of the Department of State. And of course, we've talked about the Secretary of State, that is Anthony Blinken, the former military consultant, and under him in the leadership position of the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration is Ms. Noyes. So Ms. Noyes is been in public service quite a bit here, but apparently there's a little snippet about being assigned to the Vatican, and something to do with the investigation of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. I have no information on that beyond this comment here on Wikipedia, and unfortunately I'm not quickly finding any more information. So prices are going to go up. I'm sure somebody's tracking that money to Ukraine. I'm just showing you the paperwork. And don't forget National Eating Disorders Week. A lot of love to all my anorexic and bulimic friends out there. And make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss when we go into National Security Memorandum 200, as well as some of the other fun things we found while looking into that supposed arms reporting. Thank you for watching. I'm Joe Darginio, and this is Better Than News.